Hi everyone, I'm Dio, and welcome to Court Watch, where we talk about the importance of keeping eyes on the judicial system, advocate for vulnerable people targeted by this system, and explore the best ways to protect ourselves and each other while we work to abolish the system. Let's start basic today with the ins and outs of Court Watch. Now, before we start, keep in mind I'm not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. My experience and knowledge is most relevant to New York State, and variances in the information that I'm sharing may occur depending on the laws where you live. So let's get started. What is Court Watch and why should you do it? Now, if you're like most people, your ideas about justice, courts, crime, and punishment come from movies and TV shows, many of which are directly influenced by police departments. More on that in a later video. You may assume that the laws work the same for everyone, and if you're wronged, you need only appeal to the correct state authority to ensure your rights are upheld. You may assume the truth sets you free, justice is blind, and the righteous win while the wrongdoers are punished. And you would be wrong. So let's talk about reality. Right now, in a court near you, families are being displaced from their homes. Legal apparatuses are being used to punish dissent and target marginalized people. Judges are literal golf buddies with corrupt business owners and landlords, and police and other authority figures lie on the stand with impunity. And how do they get away with this? Because no one is watching. Most of us don't know the level of corruption taking place in our literal backyards. And without showing up and keeping eyes on the judges and court officers in this country, the corruption continues with impunity. But there are also more practical reasons to observe court cases. Showing up gives an opportunity to engage with vulnerable people. You may be an advocate who can make a difference between someone losing or winning a case, even if you're not a lawyer. But even a silent observer is a powerful tool to ally with vulnerable people. Showing up to support someone during a hearing shows solidarity and can be a huge morale boost during a difficult time. Judges take their time and are more likely to stick to the proper procedures when they have an audience. And if you are media, more on this in a later video, wink wink, you are media, you can help to further create accountability by showing the courts that you are watching, listening, and taking notes. So now that we've talked about the why, let's talk about who and how. Who can do court watch? You, me, anyone. Now, there are some things that make this a little easier for some compared to others. I started watching court, a little over a year ago, and in recent months, I haven't been available to watch as many cases because of changes with my job schedule. So I bring that up to say if you're someone like me who at times has greater flexibility, all the more reason that it's important for you to be a court watcher. If you have free time during the day, most cases happen during the day. Occasionally, courts will have evening hearings or evening trials, but that's not my experience typically. So, the more flexibility you have, the more privilege you have, racial, gender, class privilege, etc., the better the more opportunities. I won't say the better prepared or the better you are, because it's not that some people are better at it than others, but the more opportunities you will probably have to observe court cases. And this is a really great way. I know right now, going into 2025, a lot of people are kind of panicking about how they can use their privilege to really make a difference and benefit people through some kind of direct action, but maybe are concerned or anxious and don't know how. This is a really easy way to get a foot in the door and start using your privilege to directly impact and benefit people who are experiencing the traumas of being targeted by the legal system. So the more free time, flexibility, privilege you have, you may find more opportunities to do this. But even if you only have maybe one day a month that you can find out when certain cases are being heard in your local courthouse and show up and just spend an hour, 2 hours, um, even if it's something you can only do occasionally, even if it's something where when you see that there's an activist group calling for people to pack the courts because an activist is facing trial, or because marginalized people are being targeted and they are facing trial, or because there's an eviction going on. Being attuned with these different community grassroots groups also will give you a heads up as to when there are calls and requests for people specifically to show up and pack the courts. So if you're someone who maybe is retired, or if your work allows you to have some flexibility during traditional business hours, if your privilege allows you to feel comfortable sitting in a courtroom without um, knowing that you specifically are not going to be targeted and harassed by the police and court officers, these are all really good reasons that you should make it a point to spend some time observing court. Now, there's no expertise required. You don't need to be a law student. You don't need to be involved in the case. You don't need to be anything. You just need to show up. Most cases are open to the public. Now, how do you find when and where things are happening in court? It depends on the type of court and where you are. Most city courts will have their court calendar posted online. So you can search, Albany City Court, if you're in Albany, New York, or Saratoga Springs City Court, court calendar, and you'll be taken to an app where you can search the court calendar by criminal cases, by civil cases, by eviction cases. It's, if you know how to navigate most online apps and things like that, it's pretty relatively user friendly to do it that way. The problem is when it comes to what are sometimes called justice courts. Now, these are small town courts, village courts, courts in rural areas. They are often not plugged in to these online court calendars. So, the way you find out with these courts, you can simply call them, and you can do this with a city court as well if you feel more comfortable with a phone call versus online. You can just call them and say, I'm interested. You don't have to say that you're going to observe. You can just say, when does your court have eviction cases? Some city courts have eviction cases every day. Some places have a separate eviction and housing court. Where I live in the Capital District of New York, we don't have a separate housing court, so I'm frequently going to refer to it all in one with other civil cases. But know that in New York City, in Rochester, in other cities and states, housing court is its own separate entity. So you might call and ask, when are the drug court hearings? When are the eviction court hearings? When are your criminal proceedings? But it's a safe bet that if you're talking about a city court, showing up any day of the week at around 9 o'clock or even 8:30, there'll be something going on. And now, if you want to find a very specific case, that's where you might need to make a call or search online. When it comes to town courts, that's where things get a little more complicated, and a phone call is best. The town court near where I live has eviction cases like once a week for a couple of hours. They might have criminal cases on a more limited basis during a more limited time frame and window. So when in doubt, you can always make a phone call. You don't have to say what your interest is or what you're doing. You can just say, I'm just curious, when are you having this kind of hearings? And they'll give you, a time frame. So once you have an idea of when the type of case is being heard, you just show up, prepare to go through a metal detector, although I've been to courts that don't have metal detectors, or that don't turn them on for whatever reason. But be prepared that you're going to go through a metal detector. Be prepared that they may put your bag through a scanner. I prefer to not bring a bag. I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to feel like I'm in TSA. Like, I prefer not to. They will tell you to turn your phone off in many cases. And you should know that, at least in New York State, if not nationwide, it is illegal to record a court proceeding unless you have permission in advance. And we'll talk more about that in a later video. Now, do people sometimes do it anyway? Sure, they do. If they are caught, they are facing serious legal charges. So I'm not going to tell you not to do it because it's a free world and that's your choice, but you should know the legality of it and the potential consequences if you record without permission. I usually do bring a notebook and a pen. If I bring my phone, I usually have it off just because I don't want to be, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want, the phone to ring or notifications to go off, and then, court officers are coming up to me and telling me to silence my phone and that kind of thing. But if you do leave yours on, they will tell you to silence it, and if it goes off, they will remind you to silence it. Um, and depending on the type of case that I'm going to watch, if it's an eviction related case, I bring some advocacy materials that I've put together. And we'll talk more about that in a later video. You don't have to be prepared with anything. You can just go and watch, and that's really valuable too. So, another way to find out that I kind of alluded to is if you are plugged in with, let's say, anti racist groups or tenants' rights groups or other types of social justice groups, you can watch for when they put out a call to action, and they'll usually request that people pack the court. Pack the court or court observers or court watch basically means they want people to show up at a certain day and time for a specific case, and just being physically present in the room. When a judge comes in and sees, you know, 20 people, 50 people, 100 people sitting in that courtroom, and the court officers will ask, they'll say, what case are you here for? And when you say, I'm here to observe such and such case, the judges take note of that. And sometimes a defendant's lawyer will make note of that as part of their defense. I've numerous times I've seen a lawyer gesture to the audience packing the court and say, "Your Honor, the defendant has a strong social network in this community, is very respected by the community. Look at all these people who have shown up to support them today." And that can factor in, that can make a huge difference. So even if you're not there to, be an advocate or interact or engage with people, just being there is a huge, really big deal. Some people, when they want to do court watch but they're shy, you can just show up and sit, and like literally all anybody will ask you is, are you here for, what case are you here for? And you just tell them, I'm here to observe. And even if you're not there to observe a specific case, you can say, I'm just here to observe. I've even been in some small town courts where the judge, his whole demeanor changed when I told him I was there to observe. He suddenly became much more friendly to the people he was interacting with who were defendants or tenants facing eviction. So, knowing that they are being watched can have an impact on the outcome. So, in conclusion, if you are interested in court watching, put these suggestions to work. You can contact your local court right away, get involved, check out a hearing that's going on in your community. Or if you want to learn more, there will be future videos where you can learn more about the ins and outs of court watching and also even becoming an advocate and taking things a step further. But again, even if you just want to go and observe, I can't even yeah, don't don't underestimate how valuable that is. So I do hope you'll stick around and watch some more of the videos in the future. Feel free to like and subscribe if you feel moved to do that, and let's keep eyes on the courts. Take care.